The moment he opened his lunchbox, everything changed. What should have been a quiet economy flight turned into an unforgettable confrontation that no one expected. Ethan had chosen the economy seat deliberately, hoping for a calm flight home after a long week. He kept his movements polite and quiet, aware of how crowded the cabin felt. When the plane leveled off, he opened the meal he had packed earlier that morning. It wasn't fancy, just warm comfort food that reminded him of home. He didn't notice the woman across the aisle watching him closely. She leaned forward with a tight smile and tapped his arm, her voice sharp but controlled. She complained about the smell, claiming it was disrespectful and unacceptable for a shared space. Ethan froze, confused and embarrassed as nearby passengers turned their heads. He apologized softly, unsure what rule he had broken. But her complaints only grew louder, as if she wanted the entire cabin to hear. She demanded the flight attendant be called immediately, insisting something be done. Ethan's heart raced, his eyes followed him, and the calm flight atmosphere cracked. What no one realized yet was that this complaint would trigger a response so unexpected, it would leave the woman speechless and the cabin stunned, and as the flight attendant approached, the tension thickened, hinting that this story was far from over. The flight attendant stopped beside the row with a calm smile, but her eyes missed nothing. In that moment, the entire cabin seemed to hold its breath. The woman launched into her complaint without pause, exaggerating every detail. She claimed Ethan was being rude, inconsiderate, and disruptive by eating his food. She insisted the smell was unbearable and demanded he be told to stop immediately. Her voice carried authority, as if she expected instant obedience. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably, sensing the imbalance. Ethan sat quietly, hands folded, his face warm with embarrassment. When the attendant finally turned to him, he spoke gently, explaining that it was food he had brought from home and that he meant no trouble. His calm tone contrasted sharply with the woman's agitation. The attendant nodded slowly, acknowledging both sides, then asked the woman a simple question about airline policy. The woman confidently claimed that passengers were not allowed to eat personal meals if others objected. The attendant's expression changed, not angry, but knowing. She politely informed her that no such rule existed and that passengers were free to eat approved food. A ripple of quiet surprise moved through the rows. The woman stiffened, clearly unprepared for resistance. But the attendant wasn't finished yet, and what came next would shift the entire balance of power. The flight attendant's voice remained calm, but her next words carried weight. What sounded like a simple clarification slowly became a turning point. She explained that personal comfort did not override shared rules, and respectful behavior applied to everyone. She asked Ethan if he was comfortable continuing his meal. When he nodded politely, she turned back to the woman with a composed smile that felt final. The woman tried to interrupt, but the attendant gently raised her hand, maintaining control without raising her voice. Nearby passengers began watching openly now. The woman's confidence cracked as she realized the audience was no longer on her side. She shifted in her seat, muttering about courtesy and standards. The attendant reminded her that courtesy worked both ways and that harassment was not tolerated on board. Then came the moment no one expected. The attendant offered Ethan an alternative meal option from the service cart, not because he was wrong, but as a gesture of kindness. Ethan declined politely, thanking her. The simple exchange earned quiet nods from surrounding passengers. The woman sat back, stunned. She had expected punishment, not professionalism. As the attendant walked away, the cabin felt lighter, but the woman's frustration was far from settled. She believed the story wasn't finished yet, and neither did anyone else. Silence filled the row, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that follows a failed confrontation. The woman stared forward, jaw tight, clearly replaying the moment in her head. Ethan continued eating slowly, deliberately calm, though his hands trembled slightly. A passenger beside him leaned over and whispered a quiet word of support. It was small, but it mattered. Minutes later, the flight attendant returned, not with food, but with information. She knelt slightly to speak at eye level with the woman, explaining that repeated complaints without cause could be considered disruptive behavior. Her tone was respectful but firm. The message was clear. The woman's face flushed. She glanced around and noticed the subtle shifts, people no longer avoiding eye contact, but watching her instead. The power dynamic had flipped. She nodded stiffly, promising no further issues. As the attendant walked away again, a soft wave of relief passed through the cabin. Ethan closed his lunchbox, appetite gone, but dignity intact. What started as a simple meal had turned into a lesson in boundaries, yet the final twist was still coming. Because the flight attendant had one more move planned, one that would quietly settle the matter once and for all. When the service cart returned, it stopped at Ethan's row again. This time, the reason surprised everyone. The flight attendant offered Ethan a complimentary snack and drink, thanking him for his patience and respectful behavior. Her words were gentle but intentional. Nearby passengers smiled, some even nodding in approval. Ethan accepted with quiet gratitude, still unsure how something so small had escalated so quickly. The woman watched the exchange, stunned. No apology came from her, only a tight expression that suggested realization had finally arrived. She turned toward the window, retreating into silence. The cabin's emotional temperature shifted from tension to resolution. The attendant made one final announcement about mutual respect and comfort, carefully worded but unmistakable. It wasn't aimed at anyone directly, yet everyone understood its purpose. Ethan leaned back, exhaustion settling in, but also relief. For the first time since takeoff, the flight felt calm again. The story that began with a complaint had transformed into a quiet statement about fairness. And though no one applauded, the shared understanding felt louder than words. Still, the true payoff wasn't public embarrassment, it was something deeper. And it would land only when the plane did. As the plane began its descent, reflections filled the cabin. Some moments don't end loudly, they end clearly. Ethan gathered his belongings, replaying the experience in his mind. He hadn't argued, raised his voice, or demanded justice. He had simply stayed calm. The woman remained silent, avoiding eye contact, her earlier confidence gone. The lesson had settled without force. When the seatbelt sign lit up, the flight attendant passed by one last time, offering Ethan a quiet smile. It wasn't about winning, it was about being seen. Passengers stood as the plane landed, conversation soft but thoughtful. The woman exited quickly, head down, while Ethan took his time. A stranger behind him thanked him for handling the situation with grace. That comment stayed with him. What began as a complaint about food had become a reminder: respect doesn't need volume. And entitlement loses power when met with calm truth. But the final moment, the one that would stay with Ethan forever, came just before he stepped into the terminal. At the gate, the flight attendant stopped Ethan briefly. Her final words completed the story. She thanked him again, explaining that moments like these reminded crews why fairness mattered. Ethan smiled, wished her a good day, and walked away lighter than he arrived. The woman was nowhere in sight, and that felt fitting. The flight had delivered more than passengers, it delivered perspective. Not through confrontation, but through composure. And sometimes, that's the most powerful response of all, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.